Sarah Chen stared out the viewport of her diplomatic shuttle as the massive space station came into view. The Galactic Council's central nexus hung in orbit around a neutron star, its metal surface gleaming against the darkness of space. She had made this journey dozens of times in her 15 years as Earth's ambassador, but today felt different. The emergency summons had come without warning. Cutting short her visit to the human colony on New Terra, her aide, Marcus Webb, approached with a datapad. He was young, barely 30, with nervous energy that never quite settled. "Ambassador, I've compiled the reports you asked for. It's not good." Sarah took the pad and scrolled through the information. Over the past 2 months, 23 colonies had gone silent. Not just human colonies, but settlements belonging to the Koran, the Valathi, and even the ancient Krell. Millions of people simply gone. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. Just empty worlds stripped of all life. "Have the council scientists figured out what's causing this?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "That's what this emergency session is about. But the rumors are bad, Ambassador." "Really bad?" The shuttle docked at the station's diplomatic port. Sarah stepped out into corridors that should have been bustling with delegates from 47 worlds. Instead, she found them nearly empty. The few aliens she passed moved quickly, their various forms tense with worry. A Valathi diplomat, her scales usually bright green, had turned a sickly gray color. A floating Thurn, energy being flickered erratically as it passed. The council chamber was a massive amphitheater carved from a single asteroid. Each species had their own alcove, designed to accommodate their unique biology. The humans occupied a modest space near the middle levels, neither prestigious nor insulting. Sarah took her seat and looked around. Every delegate was present. In 300 years of human membership, she had never seen full attendance before. High Arbiter Zexthalen called the session to order. The crystalline being stood at the center of the chamber, light refracting through its body in patterns that conveyed emotion to those who could read them. Right now, those patterns showed deep concern. "We face an unprecedented crisis." Zexthalen's voice resonated through translation devices. "An unknown force is attacking our colonies. We have designated them the Harvesters based on their behavior. They arrive at a world, consume all biological matter, and depart. They leave nothing behind." Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing images from the lost colonies. Sarah felt her stomach turn as she watched orbital footage of a Koran city being pulled apart, its inhabitants drawn up into massive ships by beams of light. The ships themselves were enormous, each the size of a small moon, their surfaces a disturbing mix of metal and something organic. "We have attempted communication," continued a Krell scientist, their hive mind voice speaking as one. "They do not respond. We have sent military scouts to observe their movements. Those ships did not return. Our best analysis suggests the Harvesters possess technology far beyond our own." A Valathi military commander stood, her claws clicking on the stone floor. "What are their numbers?" "Their origin point." The Krell scientist's response was grim. "We have identified over 200 capital ships and thousands of smaller vessels. They appear to be moving in a coordinated pattern toward the core worlds. As for their origin, we do not know. They come from dark space, from regions we have never explored." The chamber erupted in alarm sounds. Clicks, whistles, electronic tones, and human voices all blended into chaos. Sarah sat quietly, watching and listening. She had spent 15 years learning to read the undercurrents of council politics. What she saw now frightened her more than the Harvesters themselves. These beings were terrified, and terror made people stupid. Zexthalen called for order. "We have developed a response plan. All frontier colonies will be evacuated immediately. We will establish a defensive perimeter around the core systems, using the shield technology of the elder races. The younger species will be relocated behind these defenses. It will take time, but we can protect our populations." "And then what?" The question came from a Draxan delegate, a species known for their logical thinking. "We hide behind shields while they consume everything outside." "For how long?" "As long as necessary," Zexthalen replied. "Perhaps in a century or two, we will develop the technology to combat them." For now, survival is our only priority. One by one, species began to vote. The Krell approved the measure. The Velothi voted yes. The Thurn agreed. Sarah watched as 46 species voted to retreat, to abandon their frontier worlds and hide behind walls. She thought about the 3 million humans on Proxima Station, building lives on the edge of explored space. She thought about the Corin children she had met on a diplomatic mission last year, playing in gardens their grandparents had planted. She thought about humanity's own history, about all the times her species had faced extinction and chosen to fight rather than hide. When Earth's turn came, Terra stood. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, sensor, and awareness focused on her. Humanity votes against this measure, she said clearly. The silence shattered. Delegates erupted in confusion and anger. Zexelin's crystalline body flashed red, a color Sarah had never seen before. Ambassador Chen, you cannot be serious. This is a survival measure. No one has voted against such a measure in recorded history. Sarah kept her voice calm and steady. I understand the gravity of the situation, High Arbiter. However, Earth requires 48 hours to consult with our government before we can finalize our position. This is within our rights under Council law. It was a formality that no one had invoked in living memory, but Zexthalin could not refuse it. Very well. This session is adjourned. We reconvene in 48 hours for Earth's final vote. As Sarah left the chamber, she heard the whispers following her. Some delegates were angry. Others were confused. A few seemed almost hopeful. Marcus caught up with her in the corridor, his face pale. Ambassador, what are you doing? We can't fight these things. Sarah stopped and looked at her young aide. Maybe not. But I'm not going to condemn millions of people to become refugees without at least asking the question, what if we don't run? What if we fight? But the harvesters are too powerful. The Nazis seemed too powerful once, Sarah said quietly. So did the old empires, the warlords, every tyrant and monster humanity has ever faced. We're still here because our ancestors refused to accept that power made right. The Council has had 10,000 years of peace, Marcus. They've forgotten what it takes to survive when someone wants you dead. But we haven't. She walked toward her quarters, leaving Marcus staring after her. Sarah had 48 hours to convince Earth's government to commit humanity to a war they might not survive. She also had to figure out how to show the Council that retreat was just another form of defeat, slower, but just as final. The harvesters were coming. They would not stop at the defensive perimeter. They would not grow bored and leave. They would consume and consume until nothing remained. Sarah entered her quarters and immediately opened a quantum communication link to Earth. The faces of President Okonkwo, General Zhang, and Director Rousseau appeared on her screen. They looked as tired as she felt. I assume you watched the session, Sarah began. President Okonkwo nodded. We did. You've put us in a difficult position, Ambassador. I know, but I had to buy us time. The Council is making a mistake. Retreat won't save us. It will only delay the inevitable. General Zhang leaned forward. We've been analyzing the data. You're right. The harvesters aren't behaving like a natural disaster. Their attack pattern is strategic. They're hitting industrial centers and military outposts first. They're intelligent and they're planning for a long campaign. Then we need to plan too, Sarah said. We need to show the Council that fighting back is possible. Do we have any assets that could make a difference? Director Rousseau smiled grimly. As a matter of fact, we do. Let me tell you about Project Valkyrie. The Quantum Link conference lasted through the night. Sarah sat in her quarters aboard the Nexus station, watching as Earth's leadership debated humanity's future. Coffee cups piled up on her desk, and the station's artificial day-night cycle meant nothing to her exhausted mind. Director Rousseau had revealed Project Valkyrie, a secret program humanity had started the day they joined the Galactic Council. While other species focused on trade and cultural exchange, human strategists had quietly asked a simple question. What if peace doesn't last? They had built shipyards in remote asteroid belts, hidden behind mining operations. They had constructed weapon platforms disguised as research stations. They had trained a small but modern fleet for one purpose: survival in a hostile universe. How many ships? Sarah asked. General Zhang pulled up a holographic display. 43 combat vessels. Not enough to fight a major war, but enough to show the Council that resistance is possible. We also have advanced missile platforms, electronic warfare systems, and a new generation of powered armor for ground troops. President Okonkwo looked troubled. Even with all that, we're talking about going to war with an enemy that has already destroyed 23 colonies. The casualties will be enormous. The casualties will be worse if we hide, Sarah argued. The Council's defensive perimeter might hold for a few years. Maybe even a generation. But the harvesters won't stop. They'll consume everything outside the walls, growing stronger with each world they take. Eventually, they'll have all the resources they need to break through any defense. By then, we'll be weak, trapped, and desperate. Director Rousseau nodded. Our analysts agree. The harvesters are playing a long game. The Council is trying to win time, but time favors the enemy. Every day they wait, the strategic situation gets worse. The debate continued for hours. Sarah made her case over and over, facing down every argument and objection. Finally, as the station's artificial sun began to rise outside her window, President Okonkwo made the decision. We'll back you, Ambassador Chen. Prepare a statement for the Council. Humanity will stand and fight. But Sarah, you need to understand something. If this goes wrong, if we commit to this war and lose, there might not be enough humans left to try again. You're betting our entire species on this. Sarah felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. I know, Madam President, but I'd rather bet everything on a chance to win than accept certain defeats slowly. After the call ended, Sarah tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself reviewing everything she knew about the Galactic Council. These were species that had lived in peace for 10,000 years. Their militaries were ceremonial, their weapons outdated, their soldiers trained for parades rather than combat. They had forgotten how to fight because they had never needed to remember. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Ambassador Thesis, the Velothi representative. The reptilian alien scales were still that sickly gray color, and her vertical pupils were wide with stress. Am I enter, Ambassador Chen? Sarah stepped aside. Thesis moved into the room with the careful grace of a predator, even in distress. The Velothi were one of the few species that had maintained any real military tradition, though even theirs had faded over the centuries. I know what you're planning, Thesis said quietly. You're going to vote against the evacuation again. You're going to commit humanity to fighting the harvesters. Sarah nodded. We don't have a choice. Neither do my people. Theis's claws clicked together nervously. Ambassador, I must tell you something in confidence. The Velothi have broken council law. We maintained a military fleet, a real one, hidden from the other species. 3 warships, fully armed and crewed by soldiers who train for combat, not ceremony. Sarah felt hope stir in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because my people remember what it means to be prey, Thesis hissed. Before we joined the council, we fought a terrible war against another species. We nearly went extinct. We swore we would never be helpless again, but we also knew the council would not allow us to keep a real military. So we hid it. She looked at Sarah with eyes that reflected millions of years of predator evolution. We see what you see, Ambassador. The harvesters are not a natural disaster. They are hunters. And the council's plan is to gather all the prey in one place and hope the predators don't notice. Will the Velothi fight with us? Thesis was quiet for a moment. If you can prove that fighting is possible, yes. But we are only 3 ships. We need more than courage. We need a plan, a strategy, some evidence that we're not just throwing our lives away in a grand but meaningless gesture. After Thesis left, Sarah sat down and began to write. She composed the statement she would give to the council, choosing each word carefully. This wasn't just a speech. It was a declaration of independence from 10,000 years of peaceful tradition. It was humanity announcing to the galaxy that they remembered something the others had forgotten, that sometimes survival requires the willingness to die fighting. The 48 hours passed quickly. Sarah spent them meeting quietly with other delegates, testing their reactions, trying to gauge who might be persuaded to join humanity's stand. Most were horrified by the idea. A few were intrigued, and a handful like these were quietly desperate for someone to show them that resistance was possible. When Sarah returned to the council chamber, she could feel the tension in the air. The delegates had spent 2 days debating among themselves, and the consensus was clear. Humanity needed to accept reality and vote for evacuation. Even some human sympathizers had decided that Sarah was being reckless. High Arbiter Zexthalon called the session to order. Ambassador Chen, Earth has had 48 hours to consult with your government. What is humanity's final vote on the evacuation measure? Sarah stood. She looked around the chamber at the 47 species gathered there. Some were ancient, their civilizations millions of years old. Others were young, like humanity, still learning their place in the galactic community. All of them were waiting to hear if she would come to her senses. Humanity has reconsidered its position, Sarah began, and she saw relief on many faces. We have consulted with Earth's government, reviewed all available data, and carefully considered the Council's plan. Sextellan's crystalline body glowed with satisfaction. Then you will vote to approve the evacuation? No, Sarah said clearly. We change our vote from no to abstention, because Earth is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates shouted in 100 different languages. Some species had to be physically restrained by their aides. Zexthalon's body flashed through colors Sarah had no names for. Patterns of shock and outrage and something that might have been fear. You cannot do this. The High Arbiter finally managed to say, no species has ever withdrawn from the Council. The legal ramifications alone are your problem, not ours, Sarah interrupted. She walked to the center of the chamber, the space reserved for historic declarations. For 300 years, humanity has been a loyal member of this council. We've followed your laws, respected your traditions, and learned from your wisdom. But we've also watched you grow complacent. You've had 10,000 years of peace, and it's made you forget what peace actually costs. You remember what war costs, a Krell delegate said angrily. Millions dead. Worlds destroyed. Civilizations ended. That is why we chose peace. And that's why you'll die, Sarah said bluntly. Because you think peace is the absence of war. It's not. Peace is what you have when you're strong enough and willing enough to fight for it. The harvesters are coming. They won't negotiate. They won't be satisfied with your frontier worlds. They will keep coming until they've consumed everything, including your precious core worlds and all the people hiding behind your shields. She pulled up a holographic display, showing the harvester's attack pattern. Look at this. Really look at it. They're not moving randomly. They're hitting your industrial centers first, your military outposts, your research facilities. This is strategy. This is warfare. And you're responding by huddling together and hoping they get full before they reach you. What would you have us do? Zexthalon demanded. Throw our lives away in futile attacks? We've seen your species' history, Ambassador Chen. You humans are very good at dying bravely. But being dead doesn't save anyone. You're right, Sarah admitted. Dying bravely is pointless if it doesn't achieve anything. But fighting intelligently, using strategy and courage together, that's how you survive. That's how humanity climbed from the caves to the stars. We fought every step of the way, against nature, against each other, against anyone who tried to make us prey. She turned to address the entire chamber. Humanity is going to war against the harvesters. We're going to fight them at every frontier world, make them pay for every planet they take, and learn how to hurt them. We don't know if we'll win. But we know we won't win by hiding, and we invite any species brave enough to remember what they used to be to join us. She transmitted a data packet to every delegate. These are the coordinates for Proxima Station, humanity's largest frontier colony. In 1 week, we're holding a military coordination summit. Anyone who wants to fight is welcome. Anyone who wants to hide can stay here with the council. Sarah turned to leave the chamber. Marcus followed her, his face pale with shock. Ambassador, do you realize what you've just done? Started a war, Sarah said quietly. Or maybe just acknowledged the one that already started. Either way, there's no going back now. As they walked through the corridors toward the docking bay, Sarah's communicator began to chime. Messages were coming in from across council space. Most were angry or frightened, but some were different. Some were from species asking for more information about the summit. Some were from military officers who had been told to stand down but wanted to fight. And from Ambassador Thisis, simply said, "The Velothi fleet will meet you at Proxima Station." It's time someone remembered how to have teeth. Proxima Station floated in the darkness between stars. It's a massive wheel of metal and glass that housed 3 million souls. Sarah's shuttle approached the station 3 days after her dramatic exit from the council chamber. She could already see the changes. Ships from a dozen different species crowded the docking bays, military vessels bristling with weapons that had been gathering dust for centuries. Marcus compiled reports as they docked. We've received confirmation from 15 species so far. The Velothi sent 3 warships as promised. The Krell sent something called the Warrior Clade, which apparently is a branch of their hive mind that specializes in combat. 6 other species have sent smaller contingents. And the Council's response? High Arbiter Zexalon declared us all rogue elements and called for sanctions. But 32 species abstained from that vote. They won't join us, but they won't condemn us either. The Council is fracturing, Ambassador. Sarah watched through the viewport as they docked. She could see human workers welding new weapon mounts onto the station's hull. The civilian habitat modules were being reinforced with armor plating. Proxima Station was transforming from a peaceful colony into a fortress. General Jung met her at the airlock. The old soldier looked energized in a way Sarah hadn't seen before. Welcome to the circus, Ambassador. We've got representatives from 15 species. It's all wanting to know how we plan to fight an enemy that's already destroyed 23 worlds. Do we have a plan? We're working on one. But first you need to see something. Jong led her through the station to what had once been a conference center. Now it had been converted into a military command hub, with holographic displays showing the positions of every known harvester fleet and every allied ship. But what caught Sarah's attention was the gathering of aliens in the center of the room. She recognized Ambassador Thisis immediately. The Velothi scales now returned to their normal green, a sign of determination rather than fear. Beside her stood a cluster of Krell warriors, their chitinous bodies marked with war paint that hadn't been used in 6,000 years. A shimmering Thurn energy being hovered nearby, its form crackling with barely contained power. And there were others, Insectoid Draxon, in powered armor. Crystalline Core, who had somehow maintained a small fleet of privators, and representatives from species Sarah had barely heard of. This is everyone? She asked Jong quietly. Everyone who came. It's not much, but it's a start. Sarah stepped forward to address the gathered aliens. Thank you all for coming. I know what it costs you to be here. Some of you defied your governments. Some of you abandoned positions of safety. All of you chose to fight when the easier path was to hide. A Krell warrior, its voice a harmony of the hive mind, spoke up. We came because you spoke truth, Ambassador Chen. The harvesters will not stop. But we are not fools. 15 species, with perhaps 50 ships between us, cannot defeat an enemy with hundreds of vessels. What is your plan? To learn, Sarah said simply. The Council has been reacting to the harvesters with fear. They see an unstoppable force and assume they can't fight back. But every enemy has weaknesses. Every strategy has flaws. We need to engage the harvesters, study them, figure out how to hurt them. That sounds like a fancy way of saying we're going to die gathering information. A Draxon officer said dryly. Maybe, Sarah admitted. But we'll die learning something useful, not cowering in a cage, waiting for the end. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. A communications officer called out, We're receiving a distress signal from Terra 4. It's a Corin colony world, 12 million inhabitants. The harvesters have arrived. The command center fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. By the time any council fleet could respond, Terra 4 would be gone, its population consumed, its cities stripped bare. Sarah asked. 6 hours at maximum FTL, Jong replied. But Ambassador, we're not ready. We haven't coordinated our fleet movements, haven't established communication protocols. If we jump in there blind, we'll be slaughtered. Sarah looked at the holographic display showing Terra 4. She thought about 12 million Corin. Families huddled together as the harvester ships descended. She thought about the children who would die without anyone even trying to save them. She thought about what it meant to stand and fight. "We're going," she said. "Now, every ship that can make the jump." "This is insane," a corps captain protested. "We don't even know what we're fighting." "That's exactly why we're going," Deeses interjected, her predator instincts understanding what Sarah was doing. "If we wait until we're ready, we'll wait forever." The ambassador's right. We need to see our enemy to understand what we face. And if we can save even a fraction of Terra 4's population, we prove that resistance is possible. One by one, the alien commanders began to nod. They were military professionals, and they understood that sometimes the worst decision was making no decision at all. Within an hour, the Allied fleet assembled at the jump point. 23 ships from 8 species. It was a tiny force compared to what they faced, but it was a start. Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, a human heavy cruiser hastily renamed the Defiance. Marcus sat at the communication station, his hands shaking slightly as he coordinated with the other ships. John commanded the tactical displays, mapping out a battle plan with the limited information they had. "All ships ready," Marcus reported. "On your command, Ambassador?" Sarah took a deep breath. She had spent 15 years as a diplomat, using words to solve problems. Now she was leading ships into battle, and words wouldn't save anyone. "Jump," she ordered. The fleet entered FTL, reality twisting around them as they crossed 6 light years in minutes. When they emerged at the edge of the Terra system, Sarah felt her courage waver. The holographic display showed 3 massive harvester ships orbiting Terra for each vessel, the size of a small moon. Swarms of smaller craft descended to the surface like locusts. Even from this distance, sensors showed the cities being pulled apart, their buildings and inhabitants drawn up into the belly of the harvester ships via beams of invisible force. "Mother of God," Marcus whispered. "Tactical analysis," Zhang snapped. His military discipline overriding his horror, data flooded the displays. The harvester ships were unlike anything in Council databases. Their hulls seemed to be a fusion of organic and mechanical materials, with sections that pulsed like living tissue. Energy readings were off the charts. Weapon systems were everywhere on their surfaces. "We can't fight that," a Velothi captain transmitted. "We'd last maybe 5 minutes. We're not here to fight them head-on," Sarah replied. "Zhang, what are their weak points?" The general studied the tactical display. "They're focused on the planet. All their attention is on harvesting. Their smaller craft are spread out across the surface. If we hit them fast and hard in one location, we might be able to create confusion." "And then what?" Sarah asked. "Then we get the hell out before they kill us all. But in those few minutes we might learn something. We might even save a few thousand Corin." It was a terrible plan, but it was the only plan they had. Sarah divided the fleet into 3 groups. The Velothi ships would use hit-and-run tactics to draw the smaller harvester craft away from one section of the planet. The human and Thurn vessels would create an electromagnetic pulse to blind the harvester's sensors temporarily. And a small boarding party would attempt something insane: land on the surface, grab as many Corin survivors as they could carry, and escape in the chaos. "This is going to get a lot of us killed," Dices observed. "Probably," Sarah agreed. "Any species that wants to withdraw, do it now. No judgment, no shame. We're asking you to risk everything on a strategy that might not work." No one withdrew. Every ship confirmed they were ready to engage. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with dread. These aliens from a dozen different worlds, with different biologies and cultures and beliefs, were about to fight together for the first time in thousands of years. "Units. Execute," she commanded. The Velothi ships streaked toward Terra for at maximum speed. Their weapons blazing, they targeted the smaller harvester craft with precision strikes, destroying a dozen in the first 30 seconds. The harvester response was immediate and terrifying. Energy beams lanced out from the capital's ships, vaporizing a Valathi corvette before it could dodge. The human and Thurn vessels moved into position, charging their electromagnetic weapons. When they fired, a massive pulse of energy washed over one section of the Harvester fleet, temporarily disrupting their systems. For exactly 45 seconds, the Harvesters were blind. In those 45 seconds, 3 human dropships screamed into Terra 4's atmosphere, heading for a Corran city that was still mostly intact. Marines poured out of the ships, grabbing confused Corran civilians and throwing them aboard. The Corran were tall, blue-skinned beings with 4 arms, and they fought against their rescuers at first, too terrified to understand what was happening. "We're here to help," a Marine sergeant shouted in badly accented Corran. "Please, we have maybe 2 minutes before they notice us." The Corran finally understood and began helping each other aboard the dropships. They managed to pack in 800 civilians before the Harvester's sensors came back online. The dropships launched just as energy beams began cratering the city around them, back in space. The Allied fleet was taking heavy casualties. 2 more Valathi ships were destroyed. A Krell bioship was crippled, its hull breached and leaking atmosphere. The Thurn being who had generated the electromagnetic pulse had overloaded itself, its energy form dissipating into nothingness. "All ships retreat," Sarah ordered. "We've done what we came for. Jump out now." Most of the ships made it to the jump point and escaped into FTL, but 3 vessels were too damaged, their drives offline. Sarah watched in horror as Harvester energy beams picked them apart, destroying the ships and killing everyone aboard. 7 ships lost. 3,000 lives. For 800 Corran survivors, as the Defiance jumped away from Terra 4, Sarah collapsed into her command chair. They had engaged the enemy for the first time, and the cost had been enormous. But they had learned something crucial. The Harvesters could be hurt, could be confused, could be fought. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Marcus approached her quietly. "Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast across Council space, sent directly from the Council chamber." Sarah pulled up the transmission and saw High Arbiter Zexalon's crystalline form. "Ambassador Chen has led ships on a reckless attack that resulted in massive casualties for minimal gain. This proves our position was correct. The Harvesters cannot be fought conventionally. We call once more for all species to cease this futile resistance and withdraw behind our defensive perimeter." Sarah stood and recorded her own response, broadcasting it to every ship in the Allied fleet and every species in Council space. "Today we lost 7 ships and 3,000 brave souls from 5 different species, but we saved 800 Corran who would have died. More importantly, we proved something the Council refuses to believe. The Harvesters can be hurt. This is just the beginning. To anyone watching this who wants to live free rather than die in a cage, join us. Join the Free Species Alliance. We're going to fight, and we're going to win, one battle at a time." 3 months had passed since the Battle of Terra 4, and Sarah Chen barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her hair had gone gray at the temples, despite her relatively young age. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from too many sleepless nights. The diplomatic ambassador who once negotiated trade agreements had become a war leader. The transformation showed in every line of her face. Proxima Station had transformed as well. What began as a colony of 3 million now housed representatives and refugees from 30 species. The Free Species Alliance had grown far beyond Sarah's initial hopes. After Terra 4, 17 more species openly joined the rebellion against the Council's evacuation policy. High Arbiter Zextalon's government still controlled the core worlds, but its authority was crumbling. Sarah stood in the war room, studying holographic displays that showed the current situation. The Allied fleet now numbered 86 ships, a significant force but still dwarfed by the Harvester Armada. In the past 3 months, they had fought 12 battles, saving for colony worlds and losing 5 others. The casualty count was staggering. 300,000 lives lost, both military and civilian. "Another attack?" Marcus asked, entering the room with reports. He looked older, too, the nervous young aide replaced by a hardened officer. 3 of them, simultaneous strikes on our supply lines. The harvesters are adapting their tactics. Sarah pointed to the display. They're not just consuming colonies anymore. They're targeting our infrastructure, trying to starve us out. General Zhang joined them, his uniform crisp despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes. They're learning from us. Every battle we fight teaches them our tactics, our weaknesses. I've been in wars before, Ambassador, but never against an enemy that evolves this quickly. The truth was becoming harder to deny. The harvesters were not mindless consumers. They were strategic, intelligent, and they learned from every engagement. Weapons that worked in one battle became useless in the next. Tactics that saved lives one week resulted in massacres the following week. It was like fighting an enemy that could read their minds. A communication alert interrupted their discussion. Incoming transmission from neutral space, a technician announced. It's High Arbiter Zextalon requesting a meeting with Ambassador Chen. Sarah felt surprise ripple through the command center. Zextalon hadn't spoken to her directly since she withdrew humanity from the Council. Accept the transmission. The holographic display shifted to show Zextalon's crystalline form. Flickering with colors, Sarah had learned to read his distress. Ambassador Chen, I request a meeting. Neutral territory, just the two of us. Why would I agree to that? Because your war is failing and you know it. Please, Ambassador. One conversation. If you disagree with what I have to say, you can return to your battles. Sarah agreed, more out of curiosity than hope. 2 days later, she met Zextalon aboard an ancient diplomatic vessel in unclaimed space. The interior was designed for council meetings, with spaces adapted for dozens of different biologies. Sarah found the High Arbiter in a chamber designed for crystalline beings, the walls reflecting light in patterns that were almost hypnotic. You've lost weight, Zextalon observed. Your species' stress responses are showing. I've been at war for 3 months. What did you expect? I expected you to be dead, honestly. Zextalon's colors shifted to something that might have been admiration. Your species has fought harder than I thought possible. You've inspired others to remember what warfare means. But Ambassador, you cannot win. The mathematics are clear. The harvesters adapt faster than you can develop new strategies. Every battle costs you irreplaceable resources while they simply grow stronger. And your solution is still to hide behind shields? My defensive perimeter is nearly complete. It can protect billions of lives for centuries. Your people could be safe there, Ambassador Chen. All of the Free Species Alliance could shelter behind our barriers. Let the harvesters consume the outer territories. Perhaps in time, they will move on, or we will develop the technology to fight them properly. Sarah looked at the ancient being who had led the council for 2 centuries. She saw a genuine concern there, but also a fundamental misunderstanding of what was at stake. High Arbiter, your shields won't protect you forever. The harvesters won't move on. They'll wait outside your barriers, consuming everything, growing stronger. And when they finally breach your defenses, you'll be weak from centuries of confinement. At least my people will have those centuries. What will yours have? Another 6 months of war before extinction? Sarah stood to leave. Maybe, but we'll have something else. We'll have died free, fighting for something that mattered. Your people will die in a cage, wondering when the predators outside will finally break in. As she reached the door, Zextalon spoke again. Wait, there is something you should know, something the Council has kept secret for 10,000 years. The High Arbiter transmitted a data file. If you insist on continuing this war, you should understand what you're truly fighting. Back on Proxima Station, Sarah reviewed the file with her senior staff. What she read made her blood run cold. The harvesters weren't invaders from unknown space. They were a council species, the very first species to develop FTL travel. 15,000 years ago, they had transformed themselves, merging their biology with technology in a quest to transcend physical limitations. They had become the harvesters, seeing organic life as inefficient and wasteful. The Council isn't fighting invaders, Director Rousseau said quietly. They're running from their own ancestors. Worse than that, Zhang added. Every piece of technology the Council uses, every FTL drive and shield generator, is based on harvester technology from before their transformation. If we can access their original specifications, we might find vulnerabilities in their current designs. The revelation sparked a new project. Alliance scientists from 30 species began analyzing every piece of Council technology they had access to. Looking for connections to harvester systems, they called it Project Prometheus, after the human myth of stealing fire from the gods. It was a long shot, requiring resources the Alliance barely had. But it represented hope, a chance to find a weapon that could actually hurt the enemy. 6 weeks into Project Prometheus, the Harvesters made their boldest move yet. 20 capital ships appeared at the edge of Proxima's star system, supported by hundreds of smaller vessels. It was a direct assault on the Alliance's headquarters. Calculated to destroy the rebellion's heart, Sarah had 18 hours before the Harvester fleet reached Proxima Station. She called an emergency council of all Alliance leadership. The question was simple: evacuate and preserve the Alliance's leadership, or stand and fight, risking everything on a single battle. "We have to evacuate," a Draxan general argued. "If we lose our command structure, the Alliance will collapse. If we abandon Proxima, the Alliance will collapse anyway," Desis countered. "We've told 30 species that we would stand and fight. Running now would prove the Council was right all along." The debate raged for hours. Finally, Sarah called for silence. 3 months ago, I told the Council that some things are worth fighting for. I told them that hiding behind walls wasn't survival. It was slow death. I believed those words then, and I believe them now. We stay. We fight. And if we die, proving that resistance is possible. The vote was close, but the decision was made. The Alliance would defend Proxima Station with everything they had. Civilian evacuations began immediately, but there wasn't enough time to save everyone. 2 million civilians would remain on the station during the battle, sheltering in the deepest, most protected areas. The Allied fleet assembled to meet the Harvester Armada, 63 ships against 20 capital vessels and their escorts. The odds were terrible, but the defenders had advantages. They knew Proxima's defensive grid intimately. They had prepared for this battle, setting traps and ambush points throughout the system. And they had something the Harvesters didn't: desperation. Born of fighting for their homes, the battle began as the Harvester fleet entered weapons range. Energy beams lanced through space, striking shields and armor. The first ship destroyed was a Krell bioship, its hull rupturing as Harvester weapons overwhelmed its defenses. The second was a human frigate, vaporized in an instant. The casualties mounted quickly, but the defenders fought with savage determination. Human weapon platforms, hidden in asteroids and disguised as debris, revealed themselves and opened fire. Velothi ships used their superior speed to dart in and out of the Harvester formation, targeting specific systems. Krell warriors coordinated point defense with perfect hive mind precision, shooting down incoming missiles and drones. Sarah commanded the Defiance from the center of the formation, coordinating the defense while avoiding the worst of the fighting. But as the battle wore on, it became clear they were losing. The Harvesters adapted to every tactic, countered every strategy. For every Harvester ship damaged, 3 Alliance vessels were destroyed. Then Project Prometheus scientists achieved their breakthrough. They had found it: a harmonic frequency that disrupted the organic-mechanical interface inside Harvester ships. It wouldn't destroy them, but it would temporarily disable their systems, leaving them vulnerable. There was only one problem: the frequency had to be transmitted at point-blank range. From within a Harvester ship's defensive perimeter, Sarah didn't hesitate. She ordered the Defiance to break formation and charge the largest Harvester capital ship. Her crew understood what she was asking. It was a suicide mission, but no one objected. They had chosen this path months ago when they decided to fight. As the Defiance accelerated toward the Harvester ship, absorbing devastating damage with every second, Sarah opened a channel to the entire fleet. "Whatever happens today, remember this moment. Remember that we chose to fight when we could have run. Remember that some things are worth dying for. Keep fighting. Keep believing. And if we fall, make sure the galaxy remembers what we tried to do." The Defiance's shields failed. Its hull breached in a dozen places. Crew members died at their stations, but the survivors kept the ship moving forward. They reached transmission range of the Harvester capital ship with the Defiance's bridge exposed to vacuum. Half the crew dead and critical systems failing, Sarah, wearing an emergency pressure suit, gave the final order. Fire. The harmonic frequency flooded the Harvester ship, and for the first time in the war, the Alliance saw something beautiful. The massive vessel shuddered, its lights flickering. Systems cascaded into failure. The ship went dark, drifting dead in space. The remaining Harvester vessels, apparently communicating with each other through some unknown method, reacted to their flagship's death. They retreated, jumping to FTL and abandoning the battlefield. The Alliance fleet, battered and bleeding, held the field. Proxima Station survived, but at terrible cost. 41 ships destroyed, 70,000 lives lost. Sarah's Defiance was a wreck, held together by emergency patches and prayer. Rescue teams found her unconscious on the bridge, her right arm crushed, her body broken but alive. In the medical bay 3 days later, Sarah woke to find Marcus sitting beside her bed. "We won," he said quietly. "The Harvesters withdrew from 3 other systems too. They're regrouping. Ambassador, we hurt them. We actually hurt them." Sarah looked at her ruined arm, soon to be replaced with a cybernetic prosthetic. She thought about the 70,000 who died defending the station. She thought about the message spreading across Council space, that the Harvesters could be beaten, that resistance was possible. "How many species have joined us?" she asked. 17 more in the past 3 days. High Arbiter Zexalon's government collapsed. The Council has effectively dissolved. 39 species have joined the Free Species Alliance. Marcus smiled. "Ambassador, you've done it. You've united the galaxy." Sarah closed her eyes, exhausted beyond measure. They had won a battle, maybe even turned the tide of the war. But the real fighting was just beginning. 3 months after the Battle of Proxima Station, Sarah Chen stood before a gathering of species that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. The command deck of the rebuilt station hosted representatives from 40 different worlds, all united under the banner of the Free Species Alliance. Her cybernetic right arm gleamed under the lights, a permanent reminder of the price they had all paid. The galactic situation had transformed beyond recognition. The old Galactic Council no longer existed except in name. High Arbiter Zex Thalen had stepped down. Their defensive perimeter abandoned as species after species joined the Alliance. 39 of the original 47 Council members now fought together. The remaining 8 had retreated to their homeworlds, effectively isolating themselves from the war. But the war itself had changed. After their defeat at Proxima, the Harvesters had stopped their advance. Intelligence reports showed them consolidating around a single location, the Void Nexus, a region of dark space that ancient records identified as the birthplace of Harvester civilization 15,000 years ago. General Zhang stood beside Sarah, pointing to the tactical display. "They're gathering their full strength at this location. Every capital ship, every escort, every resource they have. Our analysts believe they're preparing for something big, or defending something important," Director Rousseau added. "We analyzed the disabled Harvester ship from Proxima Station. What we found changes everything." The holographic display shifted to show internal scans of Harvester technology. "The Harvesters aren't individual ships," Rousseau explained. "They're all connected to a single consciousness, a vast intelligence distributed across their entire civilization. Every ship, every drone, every weapon is part of one enormous mind." The implications rippled through the assembled leaders. Ambassador Odysseus was the first to speak. "That explains how they adapt so quickly. They're not learning from their mistakes. They're one being experiencing every battle simultaneously." "Exactly," Rousseau confirmed. "But it's also their greatest vulnerability. If we can strike at the heart of this consciousness, at the Void Nexus where it originated, we might be able to disrupt the entire Harvester civilization at once." A Krell warrior's high voice rose in the chamber. "You propose a direct assault on their most heavily defended position? With our entire fleet?" "It's the only way to end this war," Sarah said. "We've proven we can fight them. We've won battles, saved worlds, united species that haven't cooperated in thousands of years. But we can't grind them down through attrition. They're too vast, too patient. This is our chance to strike a decisive blow. The debate that followed was fierce. Some species argued for caution, for continuing the current strategy of defensive warfare while researching better weapons. Others wanted to press the attack immediately. The vote, when it finally came, was not unanimous. Several species abstained, and a few voted against the assault. But the majority carried the Free Species Alliance would marshal its full strength for an attack on the Void Nexus. Every ship, every soldier, every resource would be committed to one massive operation. It would take 2 months to prepare, to gather the scattered fleet. To train for the largest military operation in galactic history, Earth's government sent a personal message to Terra. The people of Earth are proud of what you've accomplished. Whatever happens at the Void Nexus, know that humanity chose this path together. We regret nothing. The next 2 months passed in a blur of preparation. The Alliance fleet grew to 847 ships from 40 species. Engineers worked day and night developing an amplified version of the harmonic weapon that had disabled the Harvester ship at Proxima. The new weapon, if deployed close enough to the Harvester consciousness core, might shatter the entity's cohesion permanently. There was one problem. The weapon required so much power that it would destroy the ship carrying it. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. When Terra called for volunteers, every ship in the fleet responded. She chose the ESS Prometheus, a human cruiser named after their research project, and staffed it with volunteers from 20 different species, 1 week before the planned assault. An unexpected message arrived from High Arbiter Zexthalen. Ambassador Chen, I was wrong. I spent 200 years believing wisdom meant choosing survival above all else. But you've shown me that some things matter more than survival. The council I led died not from war, but from forgetting why our civilization was worth preserving. 8 species stand with me. We're bringing 63 ships to join your fleet. It's time we remembered how to fight. The arrival of Zexthalan's forces brought the Alliance fleet to its final strength, 910 ships. The largest armada ever assembled. Species that had been enemies in ancient times now flew in formation together. Humans and Krell, Valathi and Draxon, Thurn and Kor, all united by necessity and choice. The journey to the Void Nexus took 3 days through dark space. Terra used the time to walk through the fleet, visiting ships and speaking with soldiers. She met a young human marine from Earth who had joined specifically to fight the Harvesters after his colony was destroyed. She spoke with a Valathi warrior princess who had abandoned her claim to the throne to fight. She encountered a Krell submind that had chosen to separate from the Hive specifically for this battle, knowing it might never reconnect. Each of them knew they might not survive. Each had chosen to be there anyway. Terra realized that regardless of what happened at the Void Nexus, they had already achieved something remarkable. They had created a civilization based on choice rather than convenience, forged in fire but bound by shared purpose. When the fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Void Nexus, they confronted a sight that tested their courage. Over 200 Harvester capital ships waited for them, surrounded by thousands of smaller vessels. At the center of their formation hung a massive structure that seemed to bend space itself, a sphere of twisted energy, pulsing with dark power. It was beautiful and terrifying, a monument to ambition without wisdom. The Harvester fleet didn't attack immediately. Instead, a transmission flooded every Alliance ship, not in any language but in pure concept and emotion directly interfaced with their computers. The translation sent chills through Sarah's spine. Why do you resist completion? We offer transcendence, freedom from biological limitation, eternal existence, as part of a greater consciousness. We are what all species inevitably become. Join us. Become efficient. Become immortal. Become us. Terra felt the temptation in those words. No more pain, no more loss, no more fear of death. Just existence as part of something greater, something eternal. Around the fleet, Some crews wavered. The promise was seductive. Then Sarah remembered Lieutenant Kowalski had died getting intelligence from a harvester ship. She remembered the 70,000 who fell at Proxima Station. She remembered 3 million humans on the frontier who refused to abandon their homes. She opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. The harvesters offer us immortality, but they're lying. They're offering us extinction with a smile. We're not here because we're afraid of death. We're here because we refuse to accept that existence without choice, without struggle, without the freedom to fail and grow and change is worth having. They've forgotten what makes life precious. We haven't. All ships engage the enemy. The largest battle in galactic history began. 910 Alliance ships against 200 Harvester capital ships and their swarms. The scale was beyond comprehension. Ships died so quickly that sensors couldn't track them all. Energy weapons turned space into a storm of light and fury. The Alliance strategy was brutal and direct. Punch straight through the Harvester lines to reach the consciousness core. The Vanguard, composed of the heaviest human and Krell ships, took devastating casualties but created a breach in the Harvester formation. Valathi ships exploited the gap with their superior speed. Thurn beings sacrificed themselves by the dozens. Their energy forms overloading Harvester shields at the cost of their own existence. High Arbiter, Slaxdilon's flagship, rammed a Harvester capital ship in a deliberate collision that destroyed both vessels. The ancient being's final transmission was simple. I understand now. The Prometheus, carrying the harmonic weapon, pushed through the chaos toward the consciousness core. Sarah had insisted on being aboard for this final mission. 36 volunteers from 12 species had refused to abandon her. As they approached the core, Harvester defenses tore the ship apart. Hull breaches, fires, systems failing one by one. The crew fought to keep the ship moving forward as space itself seemed to warp around them. They reached the edge of the consciousness core's event horizon with the bridge exposed to vacuum. Half the crew dead, and the reactor on the verge of collapse. Sarah, in her pressure suit, gave the order through the emergency channel. Fire. The harmonic weapon released its payload, and the Prometheus vaporized instantly, its crew atomized by the power they had unleashed. But the disruption wave propagated through the consciousness core at the speed of thought. Throughout the battle space, every Harvester ship suddenly went dark. Their weapons stopped. Their engines cut out. The unified mind that had controlled them all for 15,000 years shattered into billions of individual pieces. The Alliance fleet, reduced to fewer than 300 ships, held their fire and watched their enemies simply stop. Some Harvester ships fled into deep space. Others drifted aimlessly. A few began broadcasting confused messages. Individual consciousnesses suddenly alone and frightened, asking questions that had no easy answers. 3 months after the Battle of the Void Nexus, Sarah Chen's name was inscribed on a memorial wall on Proxima Station. Beside her name were 36 others from the Prometheus, humans, Valathi, Krell, Thurn, and 8 other species who had chosen to give their lives to end the war. The new Galactic Council met in the rebuilt chamber, 48 species gathering as equals. There was no High Arbiter, no central authority. Decisions were made by vote, and dissent was not only allowed but encouraged. It was messy and argumentative and alive in a way the old council had never been. General Zhang, now the coordinator of defense, stood before the council and proposed the creation of memorial stations at every world lost to the Harvesters. We must never forget what it costs to survive. We must never become so comfortable that we forget how to fight for what matters. On Earth, in a park overlooking the ocean, they built a monument to Ambassador Sarah Chen. The inscription was taken from her final transmission. Recovered from the Prometheus's last data burst, we weren't special. Humanity didn't win this war because we were stronger or smarter. We won because we remembered what every species eventually forgets, that life is struggle, peace is temporary, and that the only way to honor those who came before is to fight for those who come after. Don't let the easy years make you soft. Stay vigilant. Stay human, whatever species you are. And if another threat emerges, well, you know what to do. It's time for war. A century later, the Free Species Alliance had expanded to include 17 new species. Some of them evolved from fragmented harvester remnants who had chosen to join galactic civilization as individuals. The galaxy was not at peace. There were disputes, conflicts, even small wars. But it was alive, growing, changing. In every military academy from Earth to the edge of explored space, recruits studied the speech that Ambassador Chen gave to the Galactic Council, the words that started a war and saved a civilization. They learned that freedom must be earned in every generation, that survival sometimes requires sacrifice, and that the willingness to say it's time for war when necessary is what separates living species from dead ones. The story of humanity's gift to the galaxy was not technology or military might. It was memory, the memory of what it takes to survive, the courage to fight when necessary, and the wisdom to know that some things are worth dying for. Sarah Chen had reminded the galaxy of that truth, and her legacy ensured that it would never be forgotten again.